Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's SEJ webinar. We are here to talk about the TotalSERP. And what we're talking about is everything from paid to organic to local. And our guests from DAC are going to show you how you can have a full funnel search visibility around all of those. First, let me say how excited I am that marketers are finally starting to see, search and organic as part of their total approach and like that whole customer journey. Because I feel like sometimes it's been missing, but here to share fantastic information with you, we've got Bhavin, who is the Associate Vice President of Digital Media at DAC, and Dan Lauer, Associate Director of SEO at DAC. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Heather.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Bobin's new to our SEJ webinar. This is his first one, but Dan, he's been here before, so super excited. And we do have a breakout session for you that we're going to be opening up at the end of the presentation when we start the Q&A. We have Mario and Ken in there, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm going to get into some quick housekeeping. Bhavin, Dan, where are you both based out of?
I'm based in Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah, and I'm actually out of Toronto.
Awesome. So everybody here, use the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from. I'm in West Virginia. So some quick housekeeping. If you need closed caption, it's the CC, give that a click. We do have some polls for you today. And like I said, we're going to do a Q&A at the end of the presentation. We'll also be opening that breakout room. So if you see any questions in that Q&A that you want to make sure that we ask Bhavin and Dan at the end, you can use the little thumbs up, give it an up vote, and that'll let us know it's important to you all out there. Before you leave today's webinar, we're going to have a short survey, just lets us know how it went, how we can make them better for you in the future. And you will receive today's recording in your inbox later. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to this team. You didn't come here for me. So Bhavin, Dan, it's all yours.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Heather. So yeah, you've got Bhavin and Dan here. We already introduced ourselves. So you can take a look at our funny cartoon faces for another second here as we jump in. But great to see people from all around the world joining this, which is pretty exciting. So let's dive right in. We're here to talk to you a little bit about how to own the TotalSERP, and specifically around how to regain that lost visibility across paid, organic, and local SEO. Both Dan and I have been in this space for quite a long time. I myself started out in search media years and years and years ago. Feel free to ask me later about what that was like. Let's just say the SERP looked a lot different way back then. So let's kick this off. The first thing we wanted to just kind of talk about is some framing here, right? And I think, on that point, right? No matter what type of SERP you're looking at, right? Things look a lot different these days. I think we can all agree, right? If you're looking for, high-end clothing, outfit ideas, inspo in the retail space, as well as lead gen, lots of different types of SERP features, lots of layouts. It's a much more crowded space, right, Dan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not just the simple 10 blue organic links anymore. You can have, Bhavin, as you've seen on the paid space, you can have ads at the top. You can have them at the bottom. You have AI overviews. You have AI mode. You have Reddit discussion and forums. People also ask things to know, image pack, video, local map 3-pack. So the amount of SERP features that are mixed in with the 10 blue links is just insane at this point.
Yeah, it's a very busy space. And our friends at SEJ have been publishing a lot of great content around this stuff, right? Outside of what you see here, we just had GML last week. I'm sure a lot of folks on this webinar tuned in there as well. Lots of changes, right? I just kind of cherry picked a couple of headlines here to talk about. We're actually going to touch on a lot of these different things here. But zero click is big now, right? So people are staying on the SERP. There's that whole thing where traffic seems to be going down. People are kind of getting answers they need right from on the results page. People are asking questions around SEO versus PPC. What's the best strategy for my business, right? How many resources or how much resources and support should I put between the two? Should you be bidding on your brand keywords in 2025, right? Big question. And then we've got obviously AI. You guys can have a little counter as to how many times I say that during this presentation. But lots of stuff going on, right? So, the big thing here is the space is very crowded. There are a lot of questions that, brands are asking these days. So today what we're going to discuss, and we're really excited to talk to you about this stuff, some of the ways that we help brands get that total SERP visibility and really take that unified approach between paid, organic, and local, okay, on the SERP. We're then going to show you some behind the scenes stuff, so hot off the press, very cool stuff, but how we actually use generative AI models to, perform some of that analysis at scale to help us understand this very complex environment. And also how we use that to generate and drive recommendations and outcomes for how to win in this space. Through content development, I'm sure a lot of you are experimenting, hopefully, fingers crossed, with all the various models out there. I know we are. It's a very, very exciting time to be in media and search and in our space. And then finally, we'll actually go through some examples of what it looks like to drive measurable outcomes with that integrated search marketing approach and program. Okay. So we've got a process here at DAC called TotalSERP. It's a combination of AI and tech, right? That identifies opportunities and really allows you to dominate the SERP across paid, organic, and local channels. Okay. It's a combination of processes, and you'll see it's augmented by AI and tech. And again, we'll show you how this works. It's really, really cool stuff. Before we kind of get into that, we wanted to kick off a quick poll here. So the first question that we've got here is we're wondering which what's your biggest search challenge right now? So we want to hear from you guys. What challenge are you facing in search? Is it maybe one of those article headlines that we popped up earlier? There's a lot of different things here, from lost visibility across channels, that decision on whether or not to invest into branded terms when it comes to your PPC program, reducing your paid search spend without losing volume. That's something that, a lot of brands and clients are asking right now. Finding that optimal mix of paid and organic traffic as well is super key. And then there's always the risk of competitors stealing share of traffic as we start to kind of make changes on the SERP, right? So we'll give you guys a couple seconds here to kind of respond to that. Dan, I don't know if you had any other thoughts as we see some of those results coming in.
I'm off right off the bat. I know it says 43% right now, the lost visibility across channels. I'm not too surprised that that's leading the way right now. Is I know it's just not the organic space where impressions are way up year over year and clicks are down. And I've seen click-through rates cut in half for some websites that I'm looking at. So I think it's not only organic, although I think that's a little bit of a heavy influence. I know it's affecting paid and some of the other channels as well, just getting that lost visibility in that very competitive and crowded SERP landscape as we started off to talk.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with you, right? I'm not surprised here. I think with how overcrowded that space is now and how different it is, right? So an e-com retail search results page might look completely different than something that's a little more hyper local in its nature, or maybe lead gen based, but visibility is going away. And I think the other thing that's interesting here is there's a lot more data points and kind of sources of where to get that data around visibility, right?
Yeah.
So with that, let me just advance the next one here. Okay. It's interesting to see, right? So visibility, not surprising. When we start to ask different questions of, a search program, right? Would I like to spend a little bit less on paid search, expecting the same volume? Are competitors stealing my traffic? There's a number of different questions. We're just showing kind of 4 or 5 different things that, you know, a lot of our clients and brands that we work with are asking right now. But traditionally, you know, and you can see on the top above the questions here, traditionally we've answered these by looking at data in different silos. Okay. I think the big key now and moving forward in this very crowded space is starting to bring those, you know, data sources together under one view. And it's very, very difficult stuff. I mean, it's not easy. Dan, you and I have worked on a lot of projects this year together alone, and it's difficult, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really key what you hit on, the silo aspect is, especially I think for the organic space, organic can literally help inform all of the other channels for all of those SERP features. So overlaying that data from SEMrush keyword data or another third-party tool along with your Google Search Console data and either Google Analytics or Adobe, putting all of that data side by side and showing how one channel can affect another channel is really, really important. And having that not siloed, but all together harmonized is really, really key into making those database decisions.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you can also see, this is just a few kind of key data points or you know, data sources that we're looking at, from what SERP API will give you through to what you can glean from a Google Ads program, Search Console, like you mentioned, SEMrush from a rankings perspective. They're all kind of giving you a little bit of a different flavor of what's going on the SERP, right? And this is where we've been focusing a lot of our time over the past couple of years. We've built out a process for this, okay? I'm not going to go into all the detailed nuances of each step here, but I will kind of zoom in on, you know, three, I guess, phases within what you're seeing here right now. But at a very high level, what we do is, you know, we first have to create, you know, a data frame that's representative of all the query volume that a brand can receive, right? So kind of like that, you know, topical map, right? Which would have been, I think, Dan, more in your wheelhouse in the past, more of an SEO function, right? But now there's a lot more collaboration around that.
Yeah, 100%. That topical segmentation where you categorize and subcategories, it traditionally SEO would do that to kick off and it would really inform a content strategy. But now it can also inform a lot of the other channels as well, as you're prioritizing what topics and subtopics based on search demand, not from an individual keyword, but from a holistic topic standpoint, and even down to different stages of the customer journey and the traditional customer funnel can really inform paid and really inform a lot of those other channels as well.
Nice. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's interesting here that we're trying to infuse into that step is, you know, some NLP analysis, lots of AI right at the outset. So, you know, the blue, the red, and the yellow step here, where we're actually just creating, you know, a map of all the query volume that exists for a brand. There's a lot of, you know, new and novel tech that we can tap into. As we move down the process, then you're starting to kind of join in all those data sources that we see on the top left here in the circle, right? So once we have that really strong backbone of query data that we're really solid in, and we say, look, this represents the search universe for this given brand or business, we start to join in data sources. Then there's a lot of analysis, right, that occurs. And really the output of this is some really cool dashboarding. But more importantly, further AI analysis, which again, we'll show you some examples into, okay? So as I said, we'll kind of zoom in on a couple of areas here, all right? So I just want to, you know, show a little bit of how this stuff works from the, you know, building that framework standpoint. I'm going to let this play through here, and I'll just kind of speak over it as it starts to run. But what you're seeing here is, you know, the first step of some of that keyword analysis occurring, where this is for Firestone. So one of the brands we work with, oil changes, service related business, right? You can see a number of different categories popping up here already. That first step of organizing, you know, that search universe is really, really important. And then as you kind of continue through the process, you can see subtopics and topics start to pop up. There's an element of semantic analysis that occurs here as well. So even before we start to join in any of that data, right? What we're really seeing is, a real strong organization of that data backbone. When you get into that semantic analysis, we start to look at things like, okay, what is that query telling us, right? So I'll take a step back to talk a little bit about how we used to do this, right? It would have just been, what topic or subtopic does this query belong to, right? And now you're seeing, how much more complexity we can get to, again, with the help of AI models, where we're starting to understand, what is the nature of that search? Okay. Is it action-based? Is somebody, down the funnel? Is somebody looking to buy? We're really getting into intent, which I find super interesting, right? We used to have to kind of really work to glean that before. And you can see in a matter of, minutes here, we're already kind of outputting some really cool charts, lots of different types of visualizations here based on, that entire keyword classifications. Okay. All right. So let's come back to our process, right? So that's just a quick window into, let's call it organization of the search universe, right? Next, we want to get into augmenting that data set with, all of our various data sources. So we talked about SEMrush, we talked about Search Console, anywhere you can kind of tap into query level data, you can pull that in and start to join it now that you've created that really strong data frame, right? We do some of this work in ClickSense. So, there's a data model that we build out, which I'll show you in a second. We then get into analysis of that, identifying some of those core keyword sets. Identifying gaps is super important too, as we start to join in various data sources. Not everything resolves down to, a query level. So when it comes to the analysis piece, we also have to kind of clean and scrub the data as well. So that occurs. And then we get into supplementation, right? So, pulling in maybe some SERP API data of live searches that we can kind of augment here. So getting a really comprehensive view, which is, I know when I started in search, this, probably about 90% of this stuff wasn't available, right? So here's a quick little view of the data model. So it starts with the query at its heart. I think that's the kind of big takeaway. And we've been trying to crack this nut for a couple of years now. It's a tough one, right? Like getting everything boiled down to a query. What you're seeing here is, various sources from SERP API, Google Ads kind of coming in and joining together. And then once that piece is done, right? And we feel confident about that data set, then we can start to pull, some visualizations together, which is pretty important. Outputs from this step is what will feed the next phase, where we start to actually churn things through ChatGPT or various AI models, and we start to actually question the data. That's the part that I'm most excited about. I don't know about you, Dan, but
oh yeah.
And we'll show some examples. But once you actually get that rich data set out of the process here, we can actually pop it into GPTs and start to question it, right? And to really drive those insights. So let's take a look at that piece, right? So we've joined the data and now we want to get into some of that AI analysis. We've brought in our keywords, right? We've painted that picture of the query universe. We've brought in ranking data, right? So Dan, all of your data sources that you would pull into this, right? We're looking at map pack data as well. So this is not just Search Console and Google Ads exercise, right? We're tapping into Google My Business data as well, right? To give that really detailed within the map pack results, data points around that. We've got our clicks, impressions, so on and so forth, and then we start to kind of churn things through into AI, right? Before we get into that, so really what we do with this data, which again is I'm really excited about, and I know Dan is too. We've got one more poll question for you guys. So we want to know just around AI models, right? Which ones are you using to conduct your SERP performance analysis today? And the answer could be Could be none, could be we're not doing it yet, right? But you've got some popular models out there. Obviously, a lot of people are using Chat GPT. A lot of people are tapping into Gemini as well, but we want to hear from you guys on this. Dan, what's your favorite model?
Ooh, since it's come out, I've really been using Chat GTP, but I think I was telling you last week, I started using Gemini, the new model that Google announced a couple weeks ago, and it's been pretty impressive. I've done some of my own analysis where I've done the same search query across traditional Bing, traditional Google, and then done all the different searches on that same query, and all of them are different. All of them have their advantages. Chat GTP is kind of, I think, my go-to right now, but I think some of these other ones can also be used in their own unique way. And I'm really not surprised with any of these results that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Chat GPT is definitely leading the pack internally for us as well, and I think for a lot of businesses today. I'm not surprised to see Claude at 1% there. I mean, there's a couple of pieces of that process, and maybe as we're just waiting for a couple more results to come in, I'll just speak to that quickly. That process that I showed at the start, right, where we were doing a lot of that semantic analysis, Claude comes in at that step. There's a lot of real strengths with that model when it comes to doing that kind of work. So again, we spent a lot of time with that, like which model is best. I'm definitely not the expert on that. We've got a whole team internally that would speak much better to that. But I think the other interesting thing here is, 26% of you guys are not using AI today, right? So one thing I would say before we kind of continue with the presentation is give it a shot. It's tough, right? I mean, one thing that we're asking our organization to do is just try, right? And
I don't, I was going to say, Bevan, on that, I don't think what we're going through in the slides that you had before, I don't think a lot of that would be able to be possible if we weren't using AI at several of those steps. You would need to be almost a NASA engineer in order to take all that massive amounts of Excel files with advanced like Python coding and all that other type of fancy stuff in order to get that done. And AI really allows us like layman marketers that are, like you said, aren't necessarily experts to be able to put in some of those advanced analysis like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And neither of us are NASA engineers.
No, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Or fortunately, who knows? But yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of those outcomes now and what you really can do with the power of some of this AI analysis. Okay. And we'll go through a series of examples here so you guys can get a flavor of the different things that you can get out of doing some of this work. The first one here is, around a luxury men's retail e-com client that we're working with, Harry Rosen. Look them up if you haven't. They've got great clothes. They're up here north of the border in my neck of the woods. And we've been working with them now on their retail e-com program. So they're an omnichannel retailer. One of the questions that they had is, in the luxury fashion space, as I'm sure you can imagine, there is a significant amount of price differentiation on the SERP, right? So when you're selling like a luxury men's sweater, you could have products that surface in there from $200 all the way up to $1,000, right? I'm just a dad out here trying to make it, so I will not be buying the $1,000 sweater personally. But it's a hyper competitive space, right? And what you're seeing here is us outputting some of that SERP API data, which gives us a lot of information around competitive pricing, right? So what are competitors pricing those products at? Are they on sale, right? Are they not on sale? Are they selling the same products as us? And you can actually glean a lot of competitive insights here to say, hey, look, you guys are getting priced out on this search, for example, right? Maybe it doesn't make sense to go all in from an advertising standpoint. Oh, here's an area where you're really winning right now, right? And where your product really does well. So just an example, one kind of quick example here of from a competitive standpoint, how we can, really operationalize the search data to tell us a little bit about what's going on there versus having to pull out our phones and just manually check, right? So pretty cool example there. Um, we also work with a number of clients, outside of the retail e-com space. I know we've talked a little bit about that so far. So I wanted to bring this example forward. This is a finance client of ours. They work a little bit in the bankruptcy space. So they're looking at things like, their keyword universe would be insolvency, debt consolidation, stuff like that. What you're seeing here is a couple of butterfly charts that we just kind of outputted real quick, that will show you organic clicks on the left here in blue versus paid clicks. And then on the right, you're looking at a stacked chart of impressions to kind of understand local as well, right? So from an impression standpoint, where are they showing up right now? And as we kind of dig into this data, it's pretty cool the path that you can follow, right? So follow along with me here. We basically are asking AI to start giving us click-through rates from Google Search Console, from ads data against rank demand to try and understand some of those, gaps and opportunity areas. We'll then kind of drill into a couple of key topics and subtopics here, right? I'll draw your attention just quickly to the chart on the top right here, but the axis here where you can see the various subtopics and topics that came out of that first step. Right. So just bringing you guys back to that first critical step of organizing the search universe. You can see, that hierarchical classification. So is it a generic term? Does it fall under debt? Does it fall under, loan or bankruptcy, so on and so forth? As we started to kind of dig into this, take a look at the top line here. Okay. What you're seeing in blue, right? So the really big part of that bar. Okay. Those are, SERP positions that are showing up beyond page 2, right? And I'm sure everyone on this call would agree. No bueno, right? We don't want to be on page 2. It's tough to get any kind of visibility when you're in that type of position, right? So we're kind of drilling into that now, right? So that consolidation, key category for these guys. We find it interesting that it's beyond page 2. So we're starting to ask things like, what are some observations that you can give us around the data? How does it score? What are some opportunities that we can look at? And then we find this. So when we dig into debt consolidation, it finds out that there's a thematic cluster of loan mechanics and processes within that, right? That's pretty dominant. Okay. There's debt relief programs, regional loan services, other things that people are talking about and looking for as consumers, but really loan mechanics and process is the big thing, right? Now we're kind of going even one step further and talking about content, right? So what kind of content ideas can you give me to target the intent of the search, right? And again, within a matter of minutes, right, we've got some ideas here. We didn't even actually ask us to give it what it gave us on the right, but GPT said, hey, do you want a landing page sketch for this content? So, you can really use this type of analysis to, go deep and understand how you can perform better within a specific keyword theme and category, right? And then really surface up some cool nuggets and insights and outcomes, right? Just kind of a nod to local as well. So one other thing we found for these guys that I thought was pretty interesting to point out, sticking with debt consolidation, key topic area for them, and a thing that people are looking for a lot of content around and education in the space around. From a local perspective, we realized that the local pack rankings were based on businesses saying debt solutions versus debt consolidation. So you can see on the right hand side, we're searching for debt consolidation near me, but what's actually ranking in maps is the debt solution type of result, right? So different vernacular, right? And why is that important? It's important because when you look at optimizing your Google Maps listings, when you would think, naturally to kind of get that consolidation types of keywords and content in there, it's actually the opposite, right? When that part of the algorithm is doing its thing, it's looking for businesses that are listed under debt solutions, right? So lots of insights that you can draw here. I'll go through a quick Bridgestone example. We talked a little bit about We work with them on a large scale, so from upper funnel down through to lower funnel, and managing their search program as well. What you're seeing here is just an output of some of the various hierarchies of search data. And I thought this one was a pretty interesting example. They were not showing up on maps for check engine light, right? And some of this data kind of surfaced saying, hey, look, check engine light is actually a pretty popular search. You can grab some customers that way. And again, within minutes, we're coming up with a Google post, we're coming up with a Google service category. I was talking to our lead on local service management, but they just added the service category last week, so we'll kind of see if that has an impact, right? So again, from a local perspective as well, there's a lot of stuff that you can glean from looking at things in this way. Now, a really fun one. I mean, who doesn't love cruises, right? So I'll ask and to talk a little bit about some of our work with Holland America.
Yeah, thanks, Bevan. We've been working with Holland America Line for 3 or 4 plus years now, right out of the pandemic. And, the screenshot to the left where you see the topical segmentation is, well, we really needed to make a database decision because obviously cruises go all over the world, but what destinations were the ones that had the biggest search demand? So from that, we were able to pull the keyword data from SEMrush and get all of the keywords organized based on each of the destinations, prioritized by the search demand, and then using an internal tool we had, we were able to look at all the different SERP features for those topics and where they're showing up. You could see that it's very heavily video. In that green bar where it's the solid green is very heavy video influence, but also informational, and the people also ask. You can also see when you dived in a little more that reviews are really, really important to places like the Bahamas and Hawaii versus, maybe Europe or Mediterranean. So gleaning this type of insights of not just the query and the page, but what destination is showing up for what SERP features that you also need to be present for. And we actually, in the next slide, have an example that I took off my phone doing a search. Holland America Line, their bread and butter, they wanted to be known for Alaska cruises. So I did a search for best Alaska cruises. And what you're going to see in the video as it loads is that, yes, they're showing up within AI overviews. They're showing up as a cited source within the answer, within the text. They're showing up within the people also ask that we know is also powered by that, showing up for popular cruise lines. They're showing up right next to Reddit. They're showing up as the traditional #1 position for one of the 10 blue organic links. So they are showing up when we say own the SERP and TotalSERP. We were able to say, all right, Alaska is the biggest opportunity. They want to be #1 in Alaska. Let's make our content recommendations and also helping forward their paid team to make sure that we're optimizing across all of those different SERP features and they're showing up across all those different areas.
Yeah, that's great, Dan. It's really cool, how we've actually got them ranking in so many different positions here.
Yep.
Another account that Dan and I actually worked on together last year, Brooks Running Shoes. We're both runners. Don't ask Dan how many days in a row he's run. How many days are you at now?
Yesterday was 1,902 straight, all outside. Wild. In Chicago winters and heat.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it, but that's wild, man. But we had a lot of fun working on this account, and you can see some of the analysis that we brought together for them. They had a number of challenges on the SERP, obviously a very competitive environment in footwear, right? And one of the things, key insights that we pulled out here from doing a total SERP analysis was it seemed like 70 to 80% of the time, okay, they were ranking second position organically on the SERP. And we ran this a number of different ways. So we looked at, all kinds of different iterations of their branded keywords, and that stat kind of checked out, right? We then kind of hypothesized, and you can see kind of a visual of the SERP here, what would happen if we remove that paid search ad, right? So one of the questions we talked about earlier on in the session here was, should you be buying your branded terms, right? This is something pretty key. Like we've worked with this on a number of different clients. And, what we did with Brooks is we were able to use some of this data to understand, what does that competitive landscape look like against branded terms, right? Because that's typically the first question that will come up, right? Am I going to, lose traffic if we're not bidding on our brand, right? Who else is bidding on my brand? Or what does the landscape look like? When somebody's just using my core brand term, right? So just straight business name, how does that look different than when somebody says maybe core brand term plus product, right? And for Brooks and many other clients, we're trying to understand these various cases. Okay, so you might have a case on the left-hand side here where you'll have a SERP that's dominated by the brand and retail partners. So those are friendlies, right? Brooks sells their shoes through Dick's Sporting Goods, DSW. They've got an Amazon storefront, Fleet Feet. You're making a sale there as well, right? That's kind of a case where, okay, maybe you might want to lose that click, or it's maybe okay, right? You're still making that sale. On the right-hand side, though, you've got cases where you've got, brands, your brand plus competitors, right? So you've got Adidas, you've got other brands in there that you might not want to lose that click or that sale to, right? And this was all super critical because the next thing we wanted to do is actually go and test this, right? So we did it, kind of a brand holdout test. We leveraged some of that previous data that I just talked through to structure this test. So where, right? In what states? So there was a local element against what keywords. So kind of like I just illustrated, right? What areas, what pockets of the program do we want to start testing this in? And it was pretty compelling. Some of the results, I think, Dan, right? Like it was pretty cool to see some of this.
Yeah, when you see a chart like that, it's pretty glaring exactly when you start doing the test and when the data starts to go and correlate exactly what you're trying to prove was pretty exciting.
Yeah, very exciting stuff. So on the left-hand side, we just basically saw your branded search revenue from PPC start to shift right over to organic. So minus 88% year over year on the paid search side, and then plus 109% on organic. We didn't get full reabsorption, right? We got about 70%, so kind of around where we hypothesized at 75. But we did significantly decrease the branded search investment. And then the next step of the process was to figure out how to kind of bridge that gap of the remaining 30%. So if they were getting 100 apples before, we figured out how to get them 70 of those apples for free, right? Basically. And then, starting to figure out, okay, how can kind of paid step into that 30% of maybe what's being left out there on the SERP. So pretty cool test. I think for me, the strongest piece of this here is, and why we feel that this is so outcome driven, this work, is we were actually able to take about 25% of their annual search budget and start to look at different media opportunities for that. I don't know if there are any basketball fans here on the call today, but I'm a huge NBA fan, so I was particularly thrilled about this. They did some ESPN, ABC, live sports buys with these dollars in May of last year. So during the conference finals, always cool to work on a brand and then see some of this on TV while you're, having a beer and watching some sports in the evening, right? But the cool thing was the result here. It was kind of full circle, right? We took this money out of search, maintained their traffic and revenue, right? And then we were able to see a plus 40% impact on their search demand after launching some higher impact upper funnel media. Okay. So it's a really great example of, being really smart with search, getting really deep into the data, pulling out insights that you can then test, right? Using that same data to structure the test in a real meaningful way, right? That doesn't compromise the business, doesn't put the business at risk. And then spin that into, something that, will grow the brand demand, right? Which is what we're all kind of after here as marketers, right? How do we kind of grow where that brand is and where it's being seen?
And I think this is a really great case study where we really highlight where it's so important for paid and organic to not be siloed, and how it's also helping brand versus non-brand and even the other channels as well. So that is really, really great case study to show the advantage of both of those channels working in harmony together and gaining those efficiencies.
Yep, agreed. And Dan and I had a lot of fun working on it, as we've said a couple times. But we're getting towards the end here. We want to get into some Q&A. Please throw any questions that you have in the chat. We'll have a little bit of discussion as we close on our time here. But we hope you've learned a couple things, right? Dominating those search results requires that total SERP visibility, right? So really looking at that unified paid, organic, and local strategy. Not an easy thing to do, right? But a little bit easier now with the help of generative AI. We can leverage a lot of computing and analysis capabilities of that to perform some of that cross-channel SERP performance analysis. And really the key there is at scale, right? So Dan, you talked about this earlier, like we used to do some of this and parts of this in previous years, right? But I think two things. One, it would have been a lot more siloed. And two, it would have taken like months, right? And a lot of sweat, blood, and tears. Not that it doesn't still, but definitely a lot easier, as you mentioned, to do this work with generative AI.
Yeah, you would have had to limit your query set. You would have had to limit your time scale, and just the efficiencies that AI allows us to churn these out a lot quicker. And instead of months, it can be, maybe a month, where it's still going to take a lot when you're talking about 50,000 queries, and it's still a lot of data to organize, but it's a lot of prep work. And then as you showed in that arrow chart of the timeline of the process, it gets somewhat easier as you go down. It's a lot of that upfront work that drives everything that goes on towards that second half of that group.
Yeah. Completely agree. And I think last thing I'll say on that point is with the scale and with the shortened time frame allows repeatability as well, right? So instead of running this maybe once a year, you can run it, you can start launching some tests, and then you can run it a couple times, right? To kind of understand change, because there's nothing that changes faster than the SERP out there.
Yeah, that speed to market is really, really key. That I think is number one in my importance level, is the speed to market to get those insights and then implement them, and then test and go back and reanalyze, 6-9 months later is really, really important.
Yep, agreed. And then lastly, taking this approach can really drive some measurable outcomes for your businesses, for your brands, with that fully integrated search marketing program. So we hope you enjoyed some of the examples we went through today, and found this interesting and informative. Like we've been talking about a little bit here, we've got our process for this, how to bring paid, owned, earned, local, search, social, and commerce channels together under a process here that's really augmented by AI and tech. And we're happy that we got to take you through this today. So let me maybe stop sharing my screen here, and we can get to some Q&A. I think I see Heather popping up there.
I'm seeing some really good questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, I've got to get back over that tab. Hang on, let me do that now.
There are some great questions. Before we get to those, though, I'm going to open the breakout room. That way, if anyone who wants to join that. So we're going to go ahead and start the breakout room. I don't want to join the breakout room. I'm going to stay here with you all. But Mario, and we'll have Ken over there, and Catherine. And it's not going to let me push those over. Mario, it looks like you're in the main room with a... There he went. Okay, awesome. All right, here we go. And Catherine's over there. So it's just us. Dan, Robin, here we go. So let's just take this first one from John, because it came up while you were convert to Q&A. This one came up there towards the end. I'm sorry, too many buttons to push today. Here we go from John. He says, why not just optimize website and landing pages for AI search?
Ooh.
Do you want me to start with that one, Bevin?
Yeah, maybe you kick it off. I got to noodle this one for a second here.
So I think this is a great question that I think a lot of SEOs and digital marketers today are taking a look at. And in my opinion, what we're doing today for SEO and content, I don't think AI really changes much. You still need to have really great, helpful, structured content. You still need to have a really, really good tech stack. Your website needs to be fast. It needs to provide a good user experience. And on the flip side, your content needs to really match the intent to the query. And if through some of our research, it doesn't necessarily need to be just one keyword, one intent. That one article can maybe do an informational and a commercial, or an informational and a navigational type keyword. So I think the things that do change is we need to make sure that Google and other search engines are not being blocked. They're not necessarily, that you're allowing them to crawl and index and rank your content. I think there are some publishers that are blocking, but I think, as Bavin was talking about, a lot of the brand mentioned, I think this is where another channel like PR and social and brand marketing really, really do come into play. You need to make sure that the AI models know that you're the best running shoe company, or you're the best cruise line, or you're the best bank, or best place to get an oil change near me.
Yeah, it's a great response there, Dan. I think just to kind of build off maybe something you're talking about here that's been on my mind with AI search, right? I think when you think about how to rank in that space, you raise a great point. Sometimes you can't be, maybe you can't be the leader of that space, right? And I think we see this a lot. I'll give, again, kind of a luxury retail environment, right? GQ has a lot of great content. That's what they do, right? So they specialize in that. They publish great content and articles all the time. Typically, if you're looking for hey, what are the best, luxury sneakers that I can buy, you'll get GQ content surfacing in there. So if you're a brand, right, it may not make sense to optimize your website and your landing pages for that type of search. It may make sense for you to pick up the phone and call GQ and see if you can do some kind of a partnership with them, right? But I think that's something that comes to mind here for me as well. And the second quick thing I'll say, just kind of from a media perspective, is we haven't seen, or we don't fully know how media is going to penetrate AI search, right? On the SERP, there's still a lot of media slots, on the standard SERP outside of Gen AI results. And I mean, I think we all know how Google makes their money, right?
Yep.
That's not going to go away tomorrow, right? So I think that's why it's important to consider optimizing your site and your landing pages for AI search, but that's not the only piece that you've got to consider right now.
That's great. So one of the questions that we had, that we got before we came on here, is let's talk about cannibalization, right? Is there a risk of cannibalization between channels and TotalSERP approach? And how would you avoid that? I love that I threw in there.
Bavin, I was going to say that one, you could start on that one. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think there always is, right? There's always a risk of cannibalization. I think that's, one of the reasons why, especially I think brands and businesses, agencies, anybody that's looking in the search space or working in the search space needs to be looking at these things. As we kind of saw with the Brooks example and many other brands, without kind of looking at the data, you're not going to identify those points of cannibalization. So I think, the answer for me is yes, absolutely. You can see that. How do we deal with it? The most important thing to do is to do this deep analysis and come out with a really strong testing plan, because that's really truly the only way that you can understand that, right? So, in what case can I really lean on my organic presence and my organic standing to capture that search? In what places can I lean on my, my maps and my local standing to capture that search? You never know unless you start to really dig into the data, which is really what we were excited to talk about today.
Yeah, I think using data to piggyback off Bevan, what you were saying is using those pieces of data to find out where there might be risk of the cannibalization. I think in any scenario, there is going to be some, but knowing what the risk of where you don't want to cannibalize, where it might be okay for both to show up in the same area.
Yep. And then I think just the last piece that Dan, you're teeing up for me in my head here is I think there's also business priorities too, right? So outside of that, a brand may really want to dominate a specific category, right? So we talked a little bit about Holland and Alaska cruises. In that case, it's like we actually want to be everywhere. And even though there might be a little bit of cannibalization happening, like we're okay with that because we're in multiple places.
And that's also a good point because cruises are very expensive. And one of the things that you're not necessarily going to do a search, go to a website and immediately book a cruise. You might come back and that website and brand adds you into their email marketing database. You start retargeting them through paid and they show up when you're listening to a podcast or a YouTube. And it might be organic brought them in, but paid or some of those other channels are the ones that get that conversion.
All right, question from AR. How do we find out which queries can be targeted related to our business? How do we structure the queries on our website, FAQs, GBP profile? Some advice here.
Yeah, I can start to take this one. Bevan, you can add in tag on there. Is really it's starting with, either using your Google Search Console data or a tool like SEMrush or any of those third-party tools where you're going to pull the query data with search demand and SERP features, your current ranking position, URL. And like we said, we put that into what we call a topical analysis, a topical keyword segmentation. And it's segmenting out which query topics and subtopics. So like cruise destination or, types of running shoes or whatever it might be, or, how-to videos regarding oil changes. You're going to be able to segment that out based on search demand. So I wouldn't necessarily say one keyword for one thing. It's going to be taking a look at the topic as a whole. And you should be able to find out, segmenting out the intent types. So you're going to be able to get that data side by side and look at your informational queries and segment out all the queries that are, the who, what, where, why, when, how, is, and then be able to structure what is an informational blog, what is an informational and an FAQ, and be able to target that one piece of really great content in multiple forms. And then, Bevan, you and your team could usually take that and even add that on for Google Business Profile, as well as, any of the ads that you're running as well.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a great comprehensive response there, Dan. I think you hit on all the main points. I think when I look at this question, the first thing that we're asking here is which queries, right? So as Dan said, I think understanding which queries requires research. So you'll usually tap into SEMrush, Keyword Planner. I always recommend just doing live searches too, right? You can just kind of get a good feel for what's going on out there around that. But the beauty of what we talked about today is a lot of that research and finding out that query universe, a lot of that data is rolled up into the process that we're rolling out, right? So you get a good understanding that way. And then I think the second part of the question here is then, okay, once we know that universe, how do we structure our website around that, right? And for me, the how is really related to performance, volume, business focus. As I kind of talked about in the last response, there's a number of different things that would factor how you're going to structure that on your website. I'd say that the most critical thing that I see a lot of brands failing at right now when it comes to this type of exercise is lack of focus. So, the Holland example again, right, with Alaska is a really great example of focus, right? Understanding the whole universe that's out there and saying, you know what, we want to dominate this category, right? And our website and how we structure our blog content and our presence and we optimize for that is really going to be focused and built around that.
And I think we started that before AI mode and AI overviews was even released by Google. And you can see that all of that work that we did up front really helped the AI models be like, yes, they are number one in Alaska. They are the best Alaska cruise line. So the AI models are picking up on all of that targeted work and their focus on it to make those specific recommendations.
I was on mute. I'm sorry. There are some really good questions here, and we're going to have to send these over to you afterwards because we're not going to have enough time to answer them all. Let me see. So I know that you, I know, Dan, you, oh, look, we have Ken. Hey, Ken. Thanks for joining us. You're welcome. You're welcome to hang out and stay. So here's a question from Stephanie. Most upvoted question. What are some of the basic prompts we can use with tools like ChatGPT to start some SERP performance analysis?
Good question here.
I don't have a specific answer to this one, but usually the methodology that I use is you're going to have to, it's not just going to necessarily be one prompt. You're going to probably have to do several prompts and experiment. And it's not just with ChatGPT. You might want to use also Gemini. And within those, if it's something more visual, you might need to use Canvas and some of those other tools within there. So it's really getting a clean, straightforward, almost flat Excel file that you can start doing very basic prompts. And you have to remember, these AI tools are very literal. So you have to be very specific with their instructions, but you also can't make it too long, because if you make it 1,000 characters, it's going to get lost. I've tried doing that with getting meta descriptions, and once I get too specific, then it just starts going off and hallucinating off the end there.
I think I've felt some of the same stuff that Dan just mentioned there. I think for me, what has helped sometimes is even like a little bit of role play, almost like telling it what you want it to be, which is kind of interesting. It's like, hey, I want you to be a search expert that works both across SEO and SEM and is looking at things like just setting the kind of the stage for that GPT to start doing its work. So that's a cool first step to try. Helps a little bit. I think the second step would be focusing your prompts around data framing, right? So I see some people sometimes will just dump a bunch of data in there and start hammering away. It's like, spend some time with talking to it about how you want the data to be structured and maybe why, right? It's funny with tech, typically, we don't want a lot of over explanation. We just want it to be quick. But I think this is a really weird and interesting example of like the newest tech that's out there that we can work with, but that actually takes a lot of handholding. Like, you have to kind of educate it and tell it, what you want it to do. And then I think the third piece would be, once you've created that nice data frame, is then to start a conversation, right, about the data. So you saw a little bit of that in some of the finance examples that we went through. It's really about following that trail and starting to just say, hey, what about this category? Can you dig into that? And so on and so forth.
Awesome. Look, we got the whole crew. We're just going to close it out with everybody. I love it. I love it. So just real quick, Ruchika from the DIC team just put in the presenters chat that they are actually launching a set of prompts with ChatGPT in the next few days. So keep your eyes open. Maybe they'll send you something. So let's see. With that, I got to close it out, gentlemen. Real quick, tell people where to find you. Not everybody at once, maybe Dan or Robin. Tell people where to find. Sorry, I should have been a little more.
I would say for me, you can find me normally on any kind of outdoor basketball court or soccer field in the summer. That's where I'll be, or maybe running somewhere. But find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect there. That's probably the best place. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say Blue Sky, LinkedIn. I'm active on both of those. Also on on the DAC website, we have tons of success and case studies and success stories and blog posts that we do a couple per week, and a lot of information about our services and who we are and who we work with. And we'd love if you guys reach out to us.
Awesome. Mario, Ken, any last words
thank
since you're
you.
here?
No, you can find us on dacgroup.com. It's been a pleasure. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yep, could talk about this for hours.
I know. And you could probably have a whole session just on prompting, but I love this. Thank you guys so much for being here, for sharing your expertise. And we'll see everybody on the next SEJ webinar. Stick around for that survey. Let us know how this went. We'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.